In Latin America, the seaplane and sailboat ride the same waters. Dugout canoes ply the rivers in lands whose harbors welcome great steamers. Men carry loads on their backs over roads built for heavy-duty trucks. In some towns, horses still draw the trolley cars. Bridges across mountain streams may be precarious or solid. The burro is a useful beast, but slow compared to the truck he sees along the road. Llamas wait patiently for their loads in the very shadow of the airliner. Why do these strange contrasts in transportation still persist? Here in the United States, transportation is comparatively easy. A great expanse of plains, interrupted only by rolling hills and rivers and 2 mountain ranges. But in Mexico, roads and railroads are hard to build, hard to maintain. Look at Mexico's topography. For the most part, a high plateau, jagged with canyons or thickly forested, 8,000 feet above the sea. The earth is dry and hard. Or compare the contour of our own land with another region, South America at the equator. In the west, the Andes rise in the highest walls human transportation has ever tried to scale. At their highest, 2 miles above our own Pikes Peak. In the east are the almost impenetrable tropical rainforests of the Amazon and Orinoco. After the first settlements along the coast, early explorers turned their little boats inland, up the great waterway. Quesada in 1536 followed the Magdalena to its source, then trekked overland to Bogota. In 1539, Orellana struck the Amazon near the Andean foothills and sailed 2,500 miles down to the mouth. An even more adventurous journey in 1560 took Aguirre down the Amazon, across to the Rio Negro, and down the Orinoco to the sea. The dream of gold eventually drove most of the explorers away from the river trails, to prosper or to perish beyond the Andes. But a few men stayed behind, men who took up their lives along the rivers and adapted themselves to the water. In 400 years, their life along the tangled, fever-ridden banks of the river has changed little. They gather the harvests of the jungle and bring them many hundreds of miles down the river to the trading towns, living and traveling on their crude boats. The river people have seen boom towns, born of rubber and gold, spring up, flourish for a while, then sink back into the slow rhythm of river life. Coastal shipping also flourished, and often the only communication between one city and another was by these boats. No roads, no railroads, only ships. Not all the shipping lines were European or United States owned. Many were native Latin Americans. Chile, Brazil, Argentina, and others developed their own great steamship companies to trade proudly with us and with all the world. In the early days, Spain and Portugal made tyrannical laws which acted as barriers to all trade, except with the mother country. The young nations could not even trade with each other. There were men, like Francis Drake and John Hawkins, who broke those laws, but the Spaniards branded them pirates. The laws are no more, but there is still little trade between the nations, and few roads cross their borders. But within the individual countries, cities grew and prospered through expanding commerce with Europe, and eventually with North America. These great capitals, with their tall buildings and crowded boulevards, are as cosmopolitan as those of other continents, but they are not connected with each other by any ordinary means of travel. Rio de Janeiro and Buenos Aires are 5 days apart by boat, and the Trans-Andean train, which connects Buenos Aires with Santiago, runs only once a week. In only one section of Latin America have railroads been widely developed, in the plains and pampas of southern Brazil, of Uruguay and Argentina. Mexico has few lines to knit the country together. In Central America, because of the mountains which form natural boundaries, not all of the countries have been linked by rail. In Brazil, the picture is even more unusual, for here there are only tiny spur lines running from the coastal cities into the interior to pick up the riches of the jungle, but which never connect one city with another. There is another situation in Latin American transportation which is strange to us. On some of the great estates, as large as Rhode Island, there is a self-contained transportation system with excellent roads and even narrow-gauge railways, such as this one, which brings sugarcane into one central point on the plantation. Other privately owned railroads include the little line which climbs perilously into the Peruvian Andes to bring copper down from the mines to the coast. This is a company-financed railroad created by and for copper, the highest standard gauge railway in the world. It is the main contact between the little copper towns with their Indian workmen and North American overseers and the outside world. Way stations are only tiny Indian villages. There is little passenger traffic and no goods to carry out of the dry hills but the precious copper. Here the copper slabs are made to be carried across the steep, narrow mountain passes down to the sea and on to the factories in the north. The railroad problem is also difficult because Latin America is not generally industrialized. Construction material and railway equipment must be imported, even to the smallest parts for locomotives. But there are also economic difficulties. In most regions of Latin America, there have not been enough passengers and goods in the interior to support expensive railroad construction. You can travel for miles and never see a house or a human being. Such an electric train as this, the only one in Mexico, is an extraordinary sight in a leisurely land. is interesting that the only place where the railroad has proved really profitable is in an area long neglected by the explorers, whose minds were on the legends of El Dorado, and that is on the plains of Argentina. Here the British have invested more than $1 billion in an efficient, widespread railroad system originally constructed to bring the products of the Pampas to Buenos Aires so that they might be shipped abroad. And the domestic advantage to Argentina of this railway system has been enormous. To this impressive picture, there is another side, spectacular but distressing. Where the Argentine railways cross to Chile, they lie forever in the path of the avalanche. Here, tons of snow and rocks have torn down the Chilean side of the pass, burying tracks and houses. This means weeks of labor by diggers and snowplows before the track can be restored to its previous condition and the trains can again take up their schedule. There are still places the railroad cannot go, and others where the countries cannot afford to build them. In such regions, highways are being built, and automobiles, buses, and trucks are extending the transport system. This is the way in which one of the greatest transportation schemes of all time is slowly forming, the Pan-American Highway. When completed, it will be the longest continuous highway in the world, running from Alaska to Cape Horn. It is not yet finished. The work is slow and expensive. The road must follow mountain trails, which are all that remain of the great Inca Highway, and must skirt marshes and break through jungles and cross rivers in flood time. In addition, each country along the path of the road is working to bring its own internal system of roads up to join the great artery, to bring its own people within easier reach of their neighbors. Latin Americans love to travel. For the wealthy person, travel by plane, Pullman, or his own expensive car is no novelty. But for the poor, highway travel is new and exciting, and buses are places for the sort of comradeship they so deeply enjoy. Men, women, children, and bundles, cheerfully bent on going somewhere, anywhere, in a spirit of good humor and high adventure. The roads they travel are not always dusty. During the rainy season, they are often flooded, and the cars must ford streams. In addition to this complex problem of transportation, there is the further problem of rapid transit between Latin America and the United States. Railroad connections between North and South America do not exist, and perhaps never will be built. Ships are slow. Even fast steamers take more than 2 weeks to make the journey between northern and southern ports. A quicker way, a way that leaps all these hurdles of time and space, may be for Latin America the only way. Fortunately, Latin America is air-minded, perhaps more than we are. We have so many other methods of transportation that we see the airplane as only one more step in a great system. But Latin America sees it as the immediate answer to its transportation problem, a great network to link its countries together, and itself to the rest of the world. There are two main uses for the airplane in Latin America. It is a super explorer, winging across mountains and jungles to seek out new sites for mines and oil camps, and to carry engineers and officials, as well as mail and freight, to remote posts. Regular airliners have also been developed in South America as common carriers in uncommon form. Each year has seen the number of passengers and the quantity of freight and mail rise tremendously. In every country, the great airway systems have been enthusiastically welcomed. North American enterprise has provided added scope for Latin American ingenuity and manpower. Native workers and engineers have been trained as pilots and mechanics, building airfields and hangars and servicing planes. Local airlines, independent of foreign capital, are springing up everywhere. We had 100 years of struggle with transportation. The covered wagon, the riverboat, the railroad, the automobile, and now the plane. But with the technical knowledge now available to her, and with her extraordinary dream of the future, Latin America may well hurdle all the old obstacles and learn to travel and to carry her burdens over the new road south by air.